joke on me. Screw this.
Okay. We are talking It Shall Not Be Named, starring Skylar Witte, not Skylar White, just to be clear here. So It Shall Not Be Named is a micro-budget, occult witchcraft kind of style movie with one location and a cast of just 3 people. So it focuses on this character who is this young woman who effectively wants to get a roommate to kind of pay the bill. She's kind of got a boyfriend, but she wants to hold off with moving in with him. So she advertises for this roommate, and then she gets this girl turn up who she readily agrees to be a roommate. However, things take a little bit of a darker turn when she suspects the new roommate is actually a practicing occultist or practicing witchcraft or something like that. Strange paranormal events start to happen within this kind of apartment, and it points to dark magic. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let us discuss. Now, once again, I'll point out this is a very low budget movie, and it does show. But that's not to say, though, low budget movies aren't without any value, because where would we be without low budget movies on this channel? So let's talk about what I think works first of all. So I gotta say, I think they've made a smart decision here because of such a low budget, keeping the cast very small, minimal kind of locations, and really kind of just laser focused on the story and the events that unfold. Obviously not trying to kind of overextend themselves. They managed to get a reasonable amount of kind of VFX shots in here, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But most of the money, obviously, has just been on the kind of the actual production itself, the kind of the cameras and things like that. And I have to say, on a technical level, outside of some weird colour grading, I think it's relatively kind of well put together for such a low budget. On a technical level, it's relatively kind of well shot. I think the kind of the sound design is for the most part fine. One or two occasions it sounds a little tinny, but I think it's okay for this kind of low budget kind of affair. And I've certainly could have seen worse on budgets higher than this. I think the story is interesting. Now, we have this kind of one location scenario, and these can be a little dull sometimes because obviously we really don't have much in the way of different locations to make it visually interesting. But I never really felt that was the case with this movie. I think the kind of the story was strong enough to kind of still, not kind of worry about that kind of thing. The story was still interesting to kind of keep you engaged and kind of wanting the plot to kind of move forward. I also felt that it brought some other interesting elements into the story. I'm not 100% sure it was actually intentional or not, but we have this kind of relationship with our main girl, played by Skylar Witte, and her kind of boyfriend. And when she starts to kind of suspect that there may be some supernatural shenanigans going on, she becomes like overly kind of paranoid and suspicious of things, including her boyfriend's interaction with her new kind of female housemate. And, I found it quite interesting because it kind of, as a guy, if you look at it from the boyfriend's point of view, she seems unreasonable and kind of and jumping to conclusions and kind of making, irrational kind of decisions and accusations. But obviously, if you look at it from the character's, her point of view, you can understand a little bit more about she's scared and kind of, she's kind of just not sure about what's kind of going on. So I actually thought it kind of did quite a good job here of like from a relationship point of view, showing the kind of these two point of views and how they can kind of, both be right to a degree, because she does come from the boyfriend's point of view, she is coming across as quite kind of, hysterical and unreasonable. But obviously if we see the stuff that she's kind of going through, then you know, you maybe are a little bit more forgiving of it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm not entirely sure that was kind of an intent of the filmmakers, but that's how it kind of came across as it is. In regards to the actual plot that we do get and we are supposed to have, again, it's not a kind of a particularly complex plot, but it's you know, it's competent. And I think that again, when you have a low budget, a lot of it is down to, can you kind of write an interesting kind of story and with good sort of characters and things like that. So let's talk about the characters now. One thing I kind of liked about our main character isn't she isn't like some sort of like well, let me put it this, she's quite a fallible character. She doesn't seem like the sharpest tool in the box, so to speak, but it kind of made her feel more realistic. I mean, quite often you have characters that can be, you know, just kind of like bosses and kind of like make no mistakes, you know, the Mary Sue or Gary Sue. Here I think our main character seems to be quite fallible and somewhat kind of like immature in her kind of like attitudes and, you know, what she kind of wants to do. For example, she lets this kind of new housemate move in without doing any kind of security checks or even taking any ID, and her kind of boyfriend kind of pulls her up at it, and she's like, oh yeah, maybe I should have done that, and yeah, maybe she should have done. So again, she's presented as not the kind of the sharpest tool in the box. That might seem frustrating. It's kind of somewhat kind of refreshing. So that was, I kind of quite like the kind of the character work here. Now, the acting is a mixed bag. I don't think anyone is a fantastic actor here, if I'm honest. I think the girls do an okay job though. The two kind of female cast, I think, do a fine job in the kind of the in the acting department. VFX wise, it is very low budget, and at times, I have to be honest with you, it's a little hokey. But nonetheless, I do, you know, if you're willing to be somewhat forgiving in the realisation that this is such a low budget movie, I think it's still quite impressive what they managed to kind of put on the screen. So let's talk about what doesn't work. I think, again, just kind of backtracking on some of the stuff I've said, I'm somewhat forgiving on the VFX, but they are low budget. There's no getting around it. There's a sequence, for example, that they play twice in the film where we have a character kind of levitating. It's more like a silhouette, but it just looks like it's like a cardboard cutout, and it kind of looks a little silly. There's a few instances where you know, the kind of like the cheaper kind of CGI, VFX and things like that really kind of look quite cheap, like cheap CGI and VFX and things. So it's not brilliant. Again, it's a low budget. It is what it is. That's all they can afford. So you either accept low budget effects or you don't. I think the acting, as I say, is okay for our female characters, but I hate to point out individual actors, but this is a cast of three. You can't really help but do this. Our male actor, though, the boyfriend, was not particularly strong. Let me just put it like that. Not particularly strong acting, and whenever he's on screen and the other characters are interacting with him, I have to say it makes them seem worse as well. So there is that. The actual plot, I think, is interesting, but I think it gets a little bit confused towards the end, and they rely a little bit too much on kind of like something spooky kind of happening, and then it's a dream, you know, and that happens. Oh, we wake it up and it's a dream, and they do that a little bit too often within this movie. And you know, as I say, I think there are some plot elements here. Certainly, I would say in the last act, maybe the beginning of the the end of the second act, but certainly in the last act, where it's a little confused, and I don't think it's particularly kind of, you know, well told in the narrative. You can get the broad strokes, but I think that some of the kind of the nuances, I think, could have been a little better in regards to the kind of a storytelling kind of perspective. There are sequences here that I feel were either unnecessarily long, or they kind of didn't need to be on there at all. We have like a little montage sequence towards the end of the movie, which I felt was super cringe, to be honest. Some of the character motivations I don't think are particularly kind of well defined. And overall, you know, it's relatively kind of self-contained, simple story. It's not going to blow your socks off. I think it's fine. I do think some of the kind of the more amateurish kind of shortcomings will knock it down a little bit for kind of mainstream audiences, because it does just feel a little bit hokey at times. But overall, I've got to say, certainly what impressed me the most maybe was the writing. Albeit I think it got a little bit mixed at the end, but for the most part I thought it was a reasonably shot movie. Could have been a little tighter, but I have to be honest, again, we're looking at this from just a kind of like cold, hard, critical kind of lens. I would say, for generally speaking, for most people, they would probably put this as a slightly below average movie, but it's certainly not a bad film, certainly for the kind of the clear low budget that it has. I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.